This video is brought to you by Sailrite. In this video, we'll be building a stadium cushion. Building a stadium cushion is a great way to learn how to sew cushions. If you've never built cushion covers before, Sailrite recommends building a practice stadium cushion before tackling larger cushion cover projects. We're using an anti-microbial polyurethane foam, and we're marking it to 17 inches by 17 inches. You can mark on the foam with a regular Sharpie marker. Now we're going to use the electric foam cutter that's available from Sailrite. This is a professional electric foam cutter. However, you can use an electric kitchen knife as well. It works quite well. We'll be making our stadium cushion from a Naugahyde universal material. We'll lay the foam on top of the material and mark around the perimeter with the Sharpie marker. Then we'll do that to a second piece, as we need a top plate and a bottom plate. You can cut the fabric with a regular pair of shears. No reason to use a hot knife. This fabric does not unravel. If you're using a synthetic fabric like Sunbrella or a polyester, you may want to consider using a hot knife to prevent the unraveling of the fabric. To determine the length of boxing required, measure around the foam. Exclude the part where the zipper will be installed along the back side of the cushion. Our polyurethane foam is 2 inches in thickness. We're going to add a 1/2 inch for seam allowance to the boxing, and then we'll mark our fabric to 2.5 inches, strike a line, and cut it out with scissors. When we make cushions, we don't add any extra to the plates, the top plate and the bottom plate. We typically add a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch to the boxing. That allows for seam allowance and still gives a nice tight fit. To make our zipper plaque, measure the distance that's required for this, the back side of the stadium cushion. We'll be making our zipper plaque a little bit too long. We'll cut it down in a later step. We're using a number 5 Vislon zipper. We want to measure the width of that, which is 1.25 inches. Now we'll make a boxing that is 2.5 inches plus the width of the zipper. We'll strike lines on the fabric, and we need to make sure this fabric is long enough to cover the back side of the cushion. Then we'll cut it out with scissors. Now we have our top plate, our bottom plate, our boxing, and our zipper plaque. Now we're ready to sew them together. On this stadium cushion, Angela has made a fairly deep curve at each one of the 4 corners, and she's using this roll of goods as a template. Typically, I don't make the curves at the 4 corners this deep. I'll use a glass typically as my template. However, there is no right or wrong way to do it. Now she cuts them so that both plates are exactly the same. Angela is now going to make match-up marks on the 2 plates. So at the 4 corners and also approximately at the center location, she wants to make sure that the marks are the same on both the top plate and the bottom plate. And obviously she's marking the underside of the fabric. Then she'll label a single corner so that when it comes to aligning the plates correctly so the marks will match up, she'll know how to do it. We'll start by creating a zipper plaque. As mentioned before, there are multiple ways to make zipper plaques, but we find this to be the easiest. We'll fold the zipper plaque in half and then place the zipper on top of that with the teeth centered on the fold. Then mark it. We'll be creating a stitch down the length of this zipper plaque assembly. So Angela's measuring it here so that she can place a straight line along that stitch. This is along the folded edge. So now she'll strike a line, she'll fold that material in half again, and then take it to the sewing machine and sew a tack stitch down the line. Do a straight stitch, making sure the stitch is as long as possible. For this, it's approximately 8 millimeters, and do not reverse the beginning or the end. Once that tack stitch is done, we'll take scissors and cut along the fold. Take your time here and cut as accurately as possible, which makes the second step of installing the zippers much easier. Now we'll splay open the part that we just cut with scissors so that it's flat, lay our zipper on top, and be sure the zipper is centered between that area. If you've cut it right, it will be about the same width as the zipper itself. Now we'll carefully sew down the side, being sure that our stitch is approximately 1/8 inch away from the teeth of the zipper. By running our presser foot up against the teeth, we're assured that the stitch will be nice and straight when we're done. Again, take your time and be sure that the zipper is centered between this assembly. When you're done sewing that side, turn the zipper all the way around and start from the opposite end. Doing this keeps the presser foot on the same side of the teeth. And since the zipper is already centered, you can sew down this side fairly quickly. After the zipper is installed, it should be the same size as your regular boxing. Next, with a seam ripper or scissors, carefully rip out the preliminary stitch. It is true there'll be small holes, but typically they aren't seen as the zipper is usually in the backside of a cushion. For regular fabrics like Sunbrella and polyesters, the stitch holes will never be seen. For vinyls like this, you may see them. Now it's time to install the zipper slider. You'll notice that we pulled the teeth apart and we're starting the fat side of the slider onto the teeth so the two sides are even. Then we'll just pull the slider until the slider is centered in the middle of the zipper plaque assembly. We decided to install a handle for our stadium cushion. So here we're marking some scrap fabric to approximately 3.5 inches in width. The length should be at least the length of the one side of the stadium cushion. And then we'll apply double-sided tape to one edge of this length of fabric, fold it over so that it's approximately folded 1/2 inch. The double-sided tape helps to hold everything in place. Then we'll place double-sided tape on top of that 1/2 inch fold or hem. We'll remove the transfer paper on the double-sided tape, revealing the glue, and then we'll fold that again 1/2 inch in. And we'll do the same procedure to the opposite side. This will make a fairly nice handle that we're going to install a snap in a later step so that you can unsnap it and attach it to a belt loop if you choose. So here we're doing the same thing on the opposite side. We'll not show all of this. Once that other side is done, we can take it to the sewing machine and sew down both sides of the length of this handle. Makes a fairly nice handle. Typically this is the underside that is being sewn up. We'll sew a straight stitch down the length of that assembly. And then we'll sew a straight stitch down the other side of that assembly. It's now time to sew that handle and the boxing and the zipper plaque together. We're going to do that by using double-sided tape on the boxing assembly or the boxing strip. Peel the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and create a 1/2 inch hem at the end of the boxing. We'll position our handle if you've chosen to have one as shown here in the video. Obviously a stadium cushion does not require a handle. We've chosen to install it. We'll sew the handle in place to make sure that it stays in the center. On this, the zipper plaque. Reversing a little bit to lock our stitch in place. Sew carefully over the zipper so that your needle does not deflect. Now we can take our boxing and sew that directly on top of the zipper plaque with the handle installed. We want to use the 1/2 inch hem as our finishing top piece. So we'll sew a straight stitch and reverse a little bit here at the beginning of our stitch, sew over the handle and reverse on the opposite side. If your sewing machine balks at this, you could lift the presser foot a little bit as you go over the bump. There we go. Now our boxing, our zipper plaque, and the handle, if you've chosen to have one, are now sewn together. On one of the plates, we're going to mark where we want the zipper to start and stop. And there is no right or wrong way to do this. We just want it big enough to insert the foam into the cushion cover. So here Angela's marked a location where she wants the zipper to be installed, and she's going to mark a Z at each one of those locations with her pin. We're going to install a Deluxe vinyl piping around the perimeter on both the top side and the bottom side of our cushion. So here Angela is measuring around the top plate or bottom plate, it doesn't really matter which, to determine the length of the piping to cut. Always be sure you cut approximately 6 inches of extra piping. Here she's measuring out a second length which will be used for either the top side or the bottom side. So you need 2 strips that will go all the way around the cushion plus about 6 inches extra. Now we'll take the plate that has been marked for where the zipper will be installed, and we'll place the piping at the center location of the back side of the cushion with at least 2 inches hanging over the edge. And we'll start sewing about 2 inches away from the center location. And we're using a cording foot that has been installed in the Sailrite 111 sewing machine with the MCSER power system. As we get to the corners, take your time. It's sometimes necessary, if the corners are sharp, to bury your needle and lift your foot, turn the fabric, lower your foot, and continue to sew. Here, since the corners are rather deep, we don't have to worry about that. Continue to sew all around the cushion, and here we skipped forward a little bit and didn't show the whole procedure. And before you come to the middle section where the piping should be joined together, stop at least 6 or so inches away from that location and do a little bit of reversing, because we still need to join the piping to itself. You can see the mark on the bottom side of this plate. That's the center location. Angela will cut the piping at approximately that location at a diagonal. Then she'll open up the sleeve of the Deluxe piping and cut the opposite side. So here she's going to peel it up. It has been glued together, and it peels up fairly easily. Now when she cuts the opposite side, she's going to cut the inside of the piping, the foam piping, but she will not cut the cover of the one she just unpeeled. So she cuts it slightly at a diagonal. It can be cut straight as well, but notice she does not cut the cover. Now she can bury the left side of the piping on that of the right side. So she'll use the cover to cover that junction. And if it's a little bit too long, you can trim it. Here I think it's a little bit too long, but Angela just continues to sew, and it works okay. That's a pretty nice way to make a junction. There are multiple ways to make a junction when you have to join the piping together. We're only showing one. And then you want to sew to where you began and do a little bit of reversing. There's one plate done. Now do that same procedure to the second plate, sewing the piping onto it as well. We will not show this entire procedure since we just showed it on the last plate. Now we'll sew our zipper plaque and our boxing assembly together to the plate that has the zipper locations marked. And notice that we're going to start it right at the Z. We'll do a little bit of reversing here at the beginning, and then we'll carefully sew all around the perimeter, being sure that the edges of the boxing on the underside are lining up with the plate on the top side. And we have the cording foot still installed on the sewing machine because the cording still has to pass through the tunnel of the cording foot. We'll carefully sew around the entire perimeter, but we'll want to stop a few inches short of the mark that is labeled as Z. We'll show that next. We've skipped ahead, and here we're going around the last corner. And you can see directly opposite of that the mark that is Z, where the zipper plaque will be joined to this boxing. And we've stopped a few inches short of that because we need to join the zipper plaque to this, the main boxing. Angela will now determine where the boxing will stop. So she'll line up the boxing over top of that mark, and then she'll cut off the excess, leaving enough to create a 1/2-inch hem at the end of the boxing. Be sure you cut straight. Doesn't look like that in the video, but she did cut it straight. Now she'll create a 1/2-inch hem there, and then she'll join this boxing to the zipper plaque at that location. We created our zipper plaque to be too long. We already knew that from the beginning. So here we're going to determine where it should be cut. We're going to be sure that we leave an inch or two beyond where the boxing starts, and we'll just cut across it with scissors. Now we'll flatten out the zipper plaque against the plate and determine where the zipper plaque should be sewn to the end of the boxing, because you want to sew it exactly right so there's not too much fabric in there, otherwise you'll get a bubble. So here Angela's determining where the two will come together, and then she'll sew those together before she sews the assembly to the plate. We are sewing through the teeth of the zipper, so be careful that your needle does not deflect on the zipper teeth. Now that those two assemblies have been joined together, we can sew the final portion of the zipper plaque and the boxing to the plate. That's what Angela will do next. Here's where we stopped sewing, so we'll start a little bit over top of the sewing that we stopped at, do a little bit of reversing, and sew all the way to where we began sewing when we sewed the boxing to the plate. And we skipped ahead, and here we are coming to the end where we started sewing. We'll sew into that by an inch or so, do some reversing, and that boxing is now installed. Now we want to move our match-up marks that we marked on the plate to the boxing. So directly across from the plate, we want to remark on the boxing. Doing this will ensure that when we sew the last plate on this cushion, that it will be exactly in the same spot as the plate underneath, so it doesn't look twisted. That's why match-up marks are very important. Alright, there are a couple of ways to do this. Professionals will typically just match them up as they sew. People that have not sewn many cushions will sometimes use double-sided tape and baste the last plate in place because they find it easier. Here Angela is sewing without basting. Notice that as she's sewing this plate to the boxing, she's being very careful to match up the marks so that the plate is directly across from the opposite plate. You can make adjustments if your match-up marks are not matching up exactly. Just don't do it over too short of an area. Gradually make adjustments, ensuring that the marks match up. You may notice here that when she comes to this first match-up mark, it's not lined up perfectly, and she's actually pushing the boxing in a little bit faster than she is the top plate. You just don't want to do this over too short of an area. You want to do this gradually. I'm going to have Angela stop here, and now we're going to use the double-sided tape. This is a major advantage for those of you that have not sewn many cushions. So here she's using the 1/4-inch basting tape, and she's basting it all around the boxing and the zipper plaque, and around the entire perimeter of the cushion. This will make it possible for us to just baste this last plate in place so that the match-up marks are perfect. That way nothing moves when we take it to the sewing machine and sew it. The one obstacle or one negative to using basting tape is that we do not want the basting tape to show up after we are done sewing our cushion together. So keep the basting tape away from your last stitch. If you stitch into your basting tape, then the glue will show up when the cushion is turned right side out. So that's why we're using a 1/4-inch basting tape. You'll notice that after it's basted in place, all the match-up marks are perfectly aligned. Now we don't have to worry about matching them up as we sew. We just take it to the sewing machine with the cording foot installed and sew around the entire perimeter of this cushion. Makes it look pretty easy. Now because we used a small width 1/4-inch basting tape and put it as close to the raw edge as possible, this stitch will miss the basting or the glue, and so when you turn your cushion right side out, it will not be visible because it's far enough to the edge of this raw fabric, and its width is fairly small. Building a stadium cushion is a great way to learn how to sew cushions. My father told me that before I started sewing cushions for real-time projects to build a stadium cushion first. He said that I would build the first one poorly, but the second would be much better, and by then I should be ready for any type of cushion sewing. Boy, was he right. Now we open up the zipper and insert our hand and pull our cushion so that it's right side out. Then you want to be sure that all the corners are pushed out. If they're not, insert your hand and push all the corners out. The stadium cushion cover is done, except for the fact that we are going to install a snap in the handle. So we're going to use an awl here to punch a hole at the location where we want our snap to be installed. You could also use the 1/8-inch hole cutter. Then we're going to install an eyelet through the inside of the cushion, through that hole so the barrel protrudes through the hole, then install a stud on top of that. And now we're going to use the Deluxe Snap Fastener Installation Tool. We're going to put it on the inside so the eyelet is resting on that appropriately. And then we're going to hit the anvil with a hammer. And that stud is installed. And we'll do the same thing with the handle, except for in this situation we're going to install a button and a socket at the correct location so that it matches up with the stud that we've already installed on the cushion. So we'll push the button barrel through that hole that we created with the awl, and then we'll install the socket on that and set it in place just as we did with the stud and the eyelet in the cushion. Alright, then we'll just trim off the excess portion of the handle with scissors. Inserting the foam can be sometimes quite a challenge. Here we're going to fold up the foam as tight as we possibly can and insert it inside the cover and then smooth it out so that it fills all the voids. Because inserting the foam can be rather time consuming, we're going to skip ahead. Here she's just smoothing out the foam inside the cover so that it goes all the way to the corners of the cushion. The corners for this cushion are very curvy, more than I typically like to see, but that's up to the end user. I would rather see less pronounced curve at each corner, which usually results in a better fit for a square foam insert. A detailed materials list is coming up next. Typically, all that's required to build a cushion is foam, fabric, thread, piping if desired, and continuous link zipper and a zipper slider. You may also choose to use the seam stick basting tape, which may help you simplify the sewing process. For more free videos like this, check out the Sayrite website or subscribe to the Sayrite YouTube channel. It's your loyal patronage to Sayrite that makes these free videos possible. Thanks for your support.